Telling a story isn't about perfection. It's about communication. It's about our shared moments together. Hi, my name is Jeff Price, and I would like to welcome you to Intentional Musicianship, where we look at everything that goes on at center stage and the preparation behind the scenes needed to transform your performance into an unforgettable experience. I am here to encourage you, support you, and generally have a great time being united together with you through music. After a wonderful performing career as a storytelling musician around the globe, my joy is found empowering musicians to find the freedom to go beyond the music stand and the fourth wall of the concert stage to better engage with their audience members. This podcast isn't a classroom, it's a brainstorming session, and it is meant for musical performers of all ages. Together, we'll explore performance practice, stagecraft, the nuances of storytelling, and the strategies for genuine audience engagement. We're here to discover what truly makes a live performance resonate. Okay, for today's show, I just want to talk about staging and how important it is and things that you can do to really help your show. It doesn't matter what kind of group you happen to be, if it's a woodwind quintet or a brass group or a concert band or an orchestra. Different times you're going to move things around and change the focus. Just like you're a magician, you're going to end up having people look one way and have something move to another place so that the audience can see something and they're going to enjoy something different. And just to clarify before we go into a recent show that I went to, just to describe things, just want to describe some typical stage terms for everybody. And I'm doing this not necessarily to insult anybody's intelligence, but if you grew up like me, I did marching band. And so I had a different frame of reference as I learned different things. And through the years, I sort of put everything back to what I was doing in marching band. And for this, I'll just keep it really clean. So center stage is just the middle of your stage. And you're looking out towards the audience. And so when you go to the right, that's stage right or center stage right. And if you go to the left, that's center stage left. What gets confusing about this for everybody is it's all about you looking out to the audience. That's your positioning on the stage because it's always from the viewpoint of the performer, not the audience. Because the audience, when we see you, it's the exact opposite. And so when we're center stage and we go to the back of the stage, we're now going to call that going up stage or up center. And then if we go to the left, that's up stage left or up left. And we go right, that's up stage left or up left. And then when we happen to go towards the front of the stage, closest to the audience, when we're looking out to the audience, from that center stage position, we have down stage. And then, of course, we'd have down stage right if we go to the right, or down right, or down stage left, or down left, depending on the nomenclature you're using. And so, when you start at center stage, and you think of that typical spotlight, you being that one voice, center stage, well, that's where a lot of the things that you plan generally are. Now, the funny thing is when we look at center stage, we might actually realize that a lot of things that we think are center stage aren't, because where it's positioned might be in the center, but it's not center stage, which is basically dead center in the middle. So we have a lot of wiggle room in how we combine these things and what we might have to do for our particular ensemble that we have. And it's funny, like I said, for a marching band, I think of that 50-yard line as being that center. And I think of like the logo between the hash marks in the center as being that center stage part. And if you played everything center stage, sure, everybody would see you, but you're pretty far from the audience in comparison of your large stage. So you think about a football field as being the largest thing. You might think of like, what they do for Super Bowl shows. They put that stage off in the center, and then they put the crowds all around it, and then you saw the stadium even further. So it's just one of those things to be mindful of. And as I think of going away from center stage, going to the furthest part from the front of the stadium that you're looking at, you're going further back, going to the back hash marks, and you're going to that back sideline, furthest from the audience. And that's going to be your upstage we were talking about. And then as you go forward to those front hash marks and you keep going to the front sideline, then that's when we're going to be downstage. And of course, on the football field, every 5 yards we have different yard lines. And so in the same way, as we happen to have like a downstage right or a downstage left, you have different variations depending on where you happen to be. We're just a lot more precise because we're on a football field. And so I just wanted to bring that up in context of things, because when we look at our shows, what we do can really drastically change the impact, because people hear with their eyes. It's just unescapable. And I was recently at a show with the Mnozil Brass, Mnozil Brass. And it was their anniversary tour, 30th anniversary. I think it extended over a couple seasons. But they happened to make it to my area, and so I got to go to a local high school up and around the Pittsburgh area. And it was sort of interesting. I don't get the chance to go to as many brass shows and things. But in this case, it was really incredible, not only because the audience was so different, not only were just amazing musicians from the Pittsburgh area, but all these brass musicians. And I'm telling you, from that, I got to learn about all the side gigs and side hustles all these brass players had and who was playing in what pit by just listening to the conversations as I walked through the crowd. Really interesting just to see what was happening. Now, this group, if you've never seen them, you got to look them up on YouTube. You got to find them, and you got to see where they've come from and what they do, because pound for pound, I can't think of a better time I've ever had at a show and a more enjoyable show. Now, I'm a fan, so I like everything, but this is one of those things that I'm going to try to talk about, but it pretty much left me speechless. And the reason why I'm going to focus on the staging aspect of this particular show is because, I like to talk in transitions and communicate. Well, all these guys are from Europe, and they probably speak way more language than I'll ever dream of. And they didn't have to speak to get their points across. Sure, you're saying, yeah, music is the universal language. I get that. They were using that. But what they were doing was using that human-to-human connection, and they were staging things to bring out and elicit responses, just like you would in a marching band. There were 7 players, and typically like a little U formation where the lead trumpet player was on the far right, the tuba player was on the far left, and then we had 3 trombones on one side, and of course those 3 trumpet players were on the right. And so we had that bell. But every piece was different, and it was almost like you had formations like you had a marching band. But they did it in such a way to sell pieces and sell the story about what was happening. In fact, I don't think that they spoke anything until right before that first intermission at the 45-minute mark or so. The lead trumpet player just sort of motioned that he was going to drink water, didn't have to say anything, and then just gave a little 5-5-5 like for an intermission break. That's all he had to do. Everything they did was that musical and that staging part. And then in the second half, they continued on this same kind of pacing, and only at the end did they talk and have some comedy and some ribbing. Now, within this show, the pieces were 5 to 6 minutes long, some 2 minutes, some 3 minutes. There was nothing in a program. The program that we got just said Mnozil Brass anniversary. They said you couldn't record, couldn't take pictures, and so you just took it all in and just enjoyed yourself. And what I really experienced with this and what I took away, sure, they were brilliant musically. In fact, you're not going to find a group that was just tighter knit within all 7 of them knowing how to play with one another. A mistake happens with a brass partial here and there. This, very rare, but just how they played together and how they complemented one another was amazing. But they choreographed pieces. They all had clothing that sort of fit their personalities. You might see them on the street wearing these exact same clothing. One person might have a little bit more loud of a jacket and one person a little bit more subdued. And it really fit them well, but it's almost like you just walked into some people like after they got off a plane or a flight, or you happened to meet them for a lunch. But those clothes were comfortable and they worked for what they were doing. It just goes to show you don't have to be in concert black to be successful. You can just be you. And what I noticed when I got there, The stage sparse, just nothing there, no chairs, no stand. In fact, well, take that back. There was one chair, and it was sort of that upstage center. And it was just sort of out of the way up against the wall. And so some instruments. So you had some trumpets upstage and to the left, just sort of sitting there. And you had some trombones upstage and to the right. Downstage and to the right, or getting closer to the right, was like a single vase with a rose. It just sort of sat there. And so as people came and they introduced themselves by playing these songs, it was just really lovely. And sometimes they'd create tension by moving forward. Sometimes they create focus by everyone going a little bit to the right, where everybody, just visually went there. And sometimes they cause some tension and some misdirection, and they might go downstage left. And so it just depended on what they were trying to sell within a particular piece. They were natural. Sometimes, they would mock clap, like with a trombone, for example, not really clapping, but just giving that motion for the crowd to be involved. And that's just part of the choreography that really worked out. Sometimes they would stomp their foot. On one particular moment, it was really interesting. In the back along that wall, there was a xylophone, and they had some really clever show design about how they would use a couple pitches on a xylophone that led itself naturally into Blackbird by the Beatles. And really cleverly done. Another part, of the show and just how they staged was when they did that, they were all sitting on the edge of the stage. So they'd be downstage, and they were center across the 7 of them. At this time, they just sang, and that person just had the xylophone. And you talk about creating moments. I can't tell you all the songs that they played, but I can remember how they made me feel. And one of the ways they made me feel that they created was because of how they moved on stage and how they allowed me, where I sat, I sat around 10 rows back, audience right, which is, a little stage left action. And I just got to take it all in. It was interesting, just as I, close up and you can sort of come up with ways that you might enhance your show, was even something as simple as the placement of that flower, which was, again, downstage towards the right, at the appropriate time after a trombone was sort of being a musical pain in the tuchus. And everyone decided that he was too much of a pain, and so now he was alone. So he went up and picked up that flower and started picking the petals. More like a, he loves me not, he loves me, he loves me not. And it was really interesting because that's when they brought the chair on stage. The person went up to the downstage right, got the flower, went to center stage. A trumpet player came out and serenaded. Everyone came together, made up. Those are things that expanded what you could have done just with the score and the music. They enhanced what that music was trying to say. And universally, it was interesting because of the language barrier. They were able to universally communicate because they used this movement and choreography that we all sort of understood. And it really made a lot of sense. So to leave you, I just wanted to give you a couple tips of how you might do this with your show. Now, I've talked about storyboarding and how you want to go through your show and figure out what moments you would like. But it really is important to visually identify on that storyboard how your pieces look. And so it's almost like how you keep track of shots on a basketball graphic. And so we took this many 3-pointers along the 3-pointer line. We took this many inside the paint. So we sort of want to do that with our musical pieces and say, we did everything on this piece, center stage. Oh, on this piece, we had someone that came in upstage right. Well, we also had someone coming in upstage left. And then at the same time, what we decided to do in that middle was have everybody do a press toward the front to go down stage to create tension. And at the appropriate time, we had one of the players that nicely released. You might see this in a rock band where a musician, a guitar player, might walk to the front to downstage. And at that appropriate time, when they pass things back off, then they release going back to the center or upstage, wherever their normal position is as a guitarist. And someone else would then take over. And so it's important on your storyboard to be able to put these things so that you remember. Now, another thing is that you should really videotape your show and make sure that everything that you videotape, you can turn off the sound and visually understand if you can identify the piece on your show and see if you can do that from the video. And if you can, then that's going to make a lot of sense. But if every show or every piece looks the same, then you might have to relook at that because it's a little repetitious. Now, I get it. Sometimes with a concert band, you can't do a lot. Sometimes with a orchestra, you can't do a lot. And I think I've said it in some other podcasts. Well, that's when you're creative and you're involving your folks and figuring out how you can get more people engaged to maybe sell the product in such a way where you might bring some soloists and identify what parts of the stage to use and how to use it effectively. Now, the interesting thing, I was talking to a close friend the other day, and we were just talking about some of the social norms that you might have to do in a particular genre. And they made the comment, they said, well, I just couldn't do that with that genre. And my thought was, I get it. Because we as the audience, we came to see a certain thing. But this Mnozil Brass, they took risks. And they were calculated human risks for human-to-human connection. And so if you just told me that, in another setting, we do it this way, well, why wouldn't you do it that way when you get in a live performance in whatever group that you're playing? Be creative and see how you can adapt it and see how you can better connect with the audience. Now, if you like some of the concepts and ideas that we talked about today, I would love for you to reach out and talk to us here at Intentional Musicianship. I have the link in our show notes, but it's just intentionalmusicianship.com. I'd love to hear your feedback on some of the ideas that we presented today and get to know your specific needs better. Each of you are personally welcome to schedule a free meet and greet Zoom call. Don't worry, this isn't a hard sell or anything. It's just a way that we can start to build a relationship together. That's it for today's episode. We hope that some of the topics and issues addressed today will be useful to you as you move forward in your musical journey. I want to take this opportunity to say thank you for joining us today. We know your time is precious, and we really appreciate that you have taken the time to listen to us today. Consequently, we'd like to hear from each and every one of you. You can reach out and connect with us at intentionalmusicianship.com. My hope is that we build a community where we can encourage one another through our mutual experiences performing live music. I look forward to connecting with each of you again on the next episode of Intentional Musicianship.